everybody. It's so good to see you all again. As some of you know, I am the children's librarian at our local library, Her Memorial Library in Mifflinburg, Pennsylvania. And I'm really excited because this summer we're going to be doing a whole summer reading program entitled Imagine Your Story. And that's going to be all about our favorite tales to tell. Stories like fairy tales, myths, legends, tall tales, adventures, everything and anything your imagination can come up with. And I'm really excited about this summer's programming. I hope you can all come down and check it out. It's going to be great. So I thought that for our story today, I would actually read you a tall tale. And the title of the book that I want to read today is called Apples to Oregon, being the slightly true narrative of how a brave pioneer father brought apples, peaches, pears, plums, grapes, and cherries, and children across the plains. And it was written by Deborah, Hopkinson, and Nancy Carpenter. So let's go ahead and read about Apples to Oregon. And this is going to be a story about the pioneers on the Oregon Trail, which I have to tell you I've traveled on, and it's really quite fascinating and beautiful to see. It's really cool. You can still see the wagon ruts in the road where all the wagon trains passed over all those years ago. So here's our story, Apples to Oregon. All right. My daddy loved growing apples. And when he got ready to pull up roots and leave Iowa for Oregon, he couldn't bear to leave his apple trees behind. So Daddy built two of the biggest boxes you could ever hope to see. He set them into a sturdy wagon and shoveled in good wormy dirt. Then he filled every inch with little plants and trees, hundreds of them. Daddy was ready for the most daring adventure in the history of fruit. Apples ho! He cried. Along with apples, my daddy took peaches, pears, plums, grapes, and cherries. Oh, and by the way, he took us along too. All the kids in that family. We all had lots to do on the journey. Each morning, I helped Mama bake biscuits, while Daddy prepared for another long day on the trail. At night, Mama and I tucked in the little ones. Then Daddy fiddled lullabies under the stars. Why, I can still hear him crooning to the Gravensteins. Hush, little babies, don't you cry. Mama's gonna bake you in an apple pie. If that apple pie ain't sweet, Daddy's gonna munch you for his own sweet treat. Look at that, singing under the stars. And she's the only one listening. We rolled along just fine until we came to the Platte River. It was wider than Texas, thicker than Mama's muskrat stew, and muddier than a cowboy's toenails. Just looking at it made my insides shrivel. The riverbank was crowded with folks in prairie schooners trying to get up the nerve to cross. When they saw us and all of our little fruit trees fluttering in the breeze, they burst out laughing. Those leaves will be brown as dirt before you hit the plains, declared one old geezer. Plains? Scoffed someone else. That nursery wagon won't make it halfway across the river. Maybe. Oh no. But Daddy didn't let their talk worry him. He just looked me square in the eye and said, "Delicious? I'm going to need your help." Right then and there, we built a raft for his tiny trees. And then Daddy loaded me and my little sisters and brothers onto the edges. "Now, make sure my precious plants don't topple into the water," Daddy warned. Well, we hadn't gone far when that muddy drink started to pull us down. "The peaches are plummeting!" my sisters shouted. "The plums are plunging!" boomed my brothers. "Don't let my babies go belly up!" howled Daddy. Oh no. I had to think quick. We're too heavy. If we don't go faster, we'll sink. We gotta take our shoes off and kick. And so we kicked. Of course, we'd all been raised on apples, and everyone knows youngins raised on apples are strong, mighty strong. Before you could say Johnny Appleseed, we kicked ourselves clear to the other shore. But no sooner had we gotten every last tree loaded back in the wagon than I spied a foul-looking bunch of clouds stomping around the sun, just fit to be tied. The wind began to throw around everything that wasn't lashed down. Our boots, baby Albert's diapers, every pot and pan Mama had, even our own little wagon. Next, hailstones, big as plums, came hurtling out of the sky. Guard the grapes! Protect the peaches! Daddy howled. So we all started tearing off our clothes and holding them over Daddy's darlings. Bonnets, petticoats, trousers, hats, even Daddy's drawers. Uh-oh. A bunch of naked little kids out there. Woo! At last the storm passed, and Daddy's dainties were safe. After all that excitement, it felt good to hit the trail again. But before long, we came to an endless sandy desert. Now remember, us youngins didn't have a wagon or our boots. In no time, our feet were redder than the poison apple the old witch gave to Snow White. Delicious! This is our toughest challenge, said Daddy, wiping his brow as I followed him on tippy toes. We got to find a water hole, or my babies are done for. Oh no. Sure enough, by noon, fruit trees began to droop. By 3, their itty-bitty tender leaves were getting crispy. By nightfall, Daddy was crying, a handful of dead branches pressed against his heart. Oh. I couldn't bear to see my daddy suffer, so early the next morning I took off to look for water. But although I searched and I searched, I couldn't even find a splash or a puddle. After a while, I got so tuckered out, I plopped down under an old sagebrush. Ouch! I yelled, landing on something hard. But when I saw what it was, I whooped for joy. My very own boot! What's more, it still had some water in it from all those melted hailstones. That was our lucky day, let me tell you. We found every one of Mama's pots and pans spread out across the sand. And they all had a few drops of water in them too. Just enough to get Daddy's trees to the next water hole before they all keeled over. My, that first sip of water sure tasted good, even if I did have to wait my turn behind some Baldwin apples. Oh, and I'm pleased to say our wagon and all the boots turned up too. Well, all except one. I reckon that nasty wind blew my left boot clear to the other side of the moon. And if it should happen to drop out of the sky on your head one of these days, I sure appreciate your sending it along to me. So watch out for that. Well, we kept on going past Courthouse Rock and Chimney Rock and Independence Rock and lots of other rocks that didn't have any names. We climbed up rocks and down rocks, and at last we reached the Columbia River. Just 100 miles to go, declared Daddy. It's a long journey. But time was running out. Our little trees had almost drowned in the river, got pounded by hailstones, and got withered by drought. How much more could they take? And now we were set for a showdown with the most ornery varmint of all, Jack Frost. Oh, I'd already spied him sneaking around our campsite, brushing the cottonwoods with his cold white tongue. But I wasn't about to let him get close to my daddy's apples. So that night, I made a big fire, and I sat by it waiting for Jack Frost to show himself. Brrr. Sure enough, as soon as the moon came up, I spotted that old good-for-nothing slinking across the meadows, heading straight for the sweet Junes. I got ready to fight. Jack Frost came at me, turning the ground so cold my toes went numb. But I didn't give up. I grabbed a flaming stick and I threw it right at him. Before you could say Peter Piper picked a peck of pretty pippins, that low-down scoundrel was hightailing it out of there, heading straight for Walla Walla, Washington. I'm mighty grateful, Delicious, said Daddy as he scrutinized his sweeties the next morning. Thanks to you, even the sweets stayed snug. We were nice and cozy too, added Mama, chucking the children. Well, that's good too. Sure enough, all Daddy's trees survived, just as if they'd come across the plains in a swanky carriage. We floated them on boats down the mighty Columbia to a pretty place near Portland. Then we planted them in that sweet Oregon dirt at last. Gold was discovered in California not long after, and thousands of people rushed there to seek their fortunes. But not us. We already had our fortune. Those apples, peaches, pears, plums, grapes, and cherries made us richer than any prospector. We were happier too. After all, apples taste a whole lot better than gold. As for my daddy, he was always as sweet as a peach. He and Mama lived happily to a ripe old age. Daddy never forgot my brave deeds on the trail. Why, as soon as he sold his first bushel of apples, he bought me the prettiest pair of boots you ever saw. Delicious, said Daddy. You'll always be the apple of my eye. The end. This is actually based on a true story. In the author's note, it tells us that the name of the pioneer was Henderson Llewellyn and his wife Elizabeth with their 8 children, Alfred, Mary, Asenath, Rachel, Jane, Hannah, Levi, and Albert. And they had one more baby born to them once they were out in Oregon. He became a very famous apple orchard and produce grower out there in Oregon. And to this day, his family still runs, his descendants still run the family orchard. So if you ever get to Oregon, go check it out. They live down by Milwaukee, Oregon. It's a really nice place with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of apple trees. And new varieties are being introduced every year. Not too many years ago, they introduced the Honeycrisp apple, which is one of my favorites. So I hope you enjoyed our tall tale story. And I look forward to seeing you guys this summer at our library when we talk about all kinds of fun tales and fairy tales and myths and legends about all kinds of things that your imagination can come up with. So we'll see you then. Have a great day. Bye-bye.